Hey everyone, my name is Tyler Mowry, and welcome to the Writer's Mind Podcast, episode 50. All right, welcome to another episode of the Writer's Mind Podcast. Thank you for being inside the Patreon. I really appreciate that. Today, what I want to talk about is some of the stress that we place on ourselves in regards to writing, and also an understanding of focusing on what you're doing right now and the value of focusing on that versus focusing on what you need to do later. So one of the things that I found that writers can struggle with, and also why I am a big proponent of new writers outlining and actually having an outline, is that when you're trying to write a draft, you can be worried about what you have to do later. So a lot of people get stuck on, a big place to get stuck is around page 30, kind of the end of the first act and coming into the second. And it's a place where a lot of people get stuck because they are worried about what's supposed to happen 20 pages out, what's supposed to happen at their midpoint, what their act 3 is going to look like. And so what happens is they freeze up because they are creating stress in their minds about something later on in the story that they're going to have to figure out. Whereas the best way to handle this is actually just to focus on the scene that you're writing right now, right? And that sounds kind of obvious, but the reality is most of the time you're not actually doing that. You're thinking about the other thing that you will write later, and you're not thinking about what you're writing right now. And that does two things to your detriment. One is that if you're not focused on what you're writing right now, what you're writing right now is not going to be the quality it should be and the quality that you can definitely make it. And two, it forces you to constantly worry about what you're going to be writing next rather than just focusing on what you're writing right now. And so I think in regards to writers needing to write poorly, and really just in regards to writers trying to get drafts out, one of the best things that you can do is to take the pressure off of the pages you have to write later and just focus on the page or two that you're writing now. And that's where an outline can be very valuable, because an outline is giving you the next monkey bar or the next rung to grab onto, so that when you're in that process, you can clearly have an understanding of where next to go. And so that can help you just, even if you're writing something that isn't right, you know what the next scene should be, and you can hop into that and keep moving forward and actually get pages out, because ultimately you aren't really learning about your writing and about yourself and about your writing process until you're actually getting those pages out. And I think that I hear a lot of people talk about having written, right? Like I don't like writing, I like having written, right? This is kind of a half joke statement, but also a real statement that people make about writing, which is they hate the process and they like having a created story. And I really don't think that's a long-term strategy or a good long-term strategy, because what it does is it means that you're never actually having fun or enjoying the thing that you are telling yourself to do all the time, which is writing. So this idea of liking having written and not actually liking the writing process isn't something that I think you should do at all. And I think part of the reason that people get into that is because they're constantly stressed about the whole of their story. They're constantly stressed about what they need to fix and the 15 scenes from now that they need to write, rather than just writing where they're at, continuing in that process and fixing the next thing the next day. And I'm not saying that I'm fantastic at this. Like, I absolutely am constantly worried about the other things that aren't what I'm doing right now. And I think that what's beneficial about learning something like screenwriting and learning the skill of screenwriting is that some of these ideas are transferable to other areas of your life. And so the idea of remaining present in the task that you're doing right now, so the idea of writing the pages that you're writing right now, not worried about the scenes later or the scenes beforehand that need to be fixed, that sort of concept can apply to other areas of your life and really your life in its entirety, where ideally we are in a space in our day-to-day where we're actually focused and present on whatever the task is that we're doing now. And this is something that I constantly struggle with, which is I'm working on something now and my brain is just running about all these other things that aren't right now. And that is how we get into a zone of frustration and a zone of stress, and essentially just in a zone of not experiencing the life that is right in front of us. And that kind of sounds, cliche, but I think there's some real truth to that, right? You want to both have an understanding of where you would like to go, where things should be. Of course, while you're writing that page right now, you're also, this is part of the step of the ultimate goal, which is having this particular screenplay done, and then in the long term having multiple stories made that are impactful, and then that becoming your career. But with that vision of the future, once you have established what that vision is and where you're trying to go, then the thinking about it should ideally be done until you decide that it's time again to focus on what needs to happen later, rather than constantly saying, okay, I'm writing this. Oh man, I got to write this later. Or I'm writing this. What is my full screenwriting legacy going to become? Oh, I'm writing this. What is the next 3 scripts I'm going to write, right? It's like the more that you can just focus on what you're doing right now, the more you can actually go in those directions. But it requires you to be able to focus on what is happening now. And I think that that's really valuable because I think it can help with the stress of writing, help with the stress of essentially what is a big project. And anytime you have a big long-term project, which one screenplay is a big long-term project, but then also cultivating a skill set of screenwriting plus becoming a professional screenwriter is also a larger goal and a more time-intensive goal. But they all sort of Russian doll, collide into each other. They all fit into each other. And it's important to understand that fitting in eventually comes down into what you need to do today and trying to focus on what you need to do today and leave what you need to do tomorrow and be satisfied, I guess is the word, and be just relaxed with the work that needs to happen today and leave what needs to happen tomorrow for tomorrow. So, I think if you look at meditation and you look at some of these, ideas, really what it's coming down to is trying to bring you into a state of existing now. And I think for me, that has always been something I've worried about and something I've been fearful, I guess, of doing, which is just coming into right now. Because I think that what I worry about is, of course, that the future works out a certain way. And I want to make sure the future works out a certain way, and I want to hold on to that. And there's an element of that is very valuable. I have a vision. I have goals. I have a world I would like to create. And that requires me having that understood and understanding what I need to do now to then go in that direction. But where I mess up, where my mistake is only focusing on what needs to happen in the future, only worried about what I am or am not getting done right now that then affects the future, and not ever just being in the present and saying, oh, how life is right now, there is value in how life is now. There is enjoyment and focusing on what's going on right now. And I think that ideally you can do that with a full understanding of where things in your mind you would like things to go in the future. Now, I also think there's an element of trying to overly control what happens in the future to an extent that is could be at a disadvantage to you, where as soon as something in the present changes the future plan, then stress and anxiety sort of skyrockets through the roof, because you say, oh, well, because of this, how am I ever going to do this? And then you've realized that you haven't actually been focusing on the present moment, and you have been only living for the future, and then your life right now isn't what you want it to be. I think that's what happens to a lot of people. And there's an idea that I've thought about a lot, right? So I'm somebody that has some larger goals. I want to sell a lot of screenplays. I want to build a production company. I have a vision for what I want to create in the future. And then at the same time, I also want to think about, if I died today, or if this was the end, if I couldn't do anything else, can I be satisfied with the things I'm doing now? Can I be content with the work that I'm doing now? Can I find the value in working with people inside my course, working with people one-on-one, sharing videos on YouTube about storytelling and story theory, things I'm very passionate about, making this podcast, which is ideally helping people do more critical thinking and try to think for themselves more, and try to break into new ideas or new ways of looking at things. And I would say that overall, I do think I am in line with that mission, I think, in that vision. And I want to make sure that right now I am serving that idea as much as I want to also do things in the future. So, there's an ability for me to discount progress and discount impact that, I think I have made so far on a lot of different people that are also passionate about screenwriting and storytelling. And there is a balance to be found there, I think. And the balance is having a clear understanding of the vision, and also then understanding, okay, that is the vision. I've settled where I'd like to go. Now I'm focused on what's going on right now and the things that are going to lead in that direction, without me having to constantly focus about what should be happening when I'm 30 or 40, right? And I think that's the real, the danger is focusing so heavily on what you want things to be later that you don't realize how great things can be now. And sometimes how good things are, like I definitely have felt even recently that I wasn't appreciating certain zones of life or certain experiences or even certain friendships when they were happening. And then it really is that idea of you don't appreciate things until they change, or until they're gone. And I don't think it should be that way. And I think part of that feeling comes by not spending the time in that present moment and in that present zone of life. And then once you leave it, you realize, things were really great. Things were really enjoyable. That was a positive element of my life that's no longer here. And things change and flow, and I think there's no issue with that at all. And I think that's also part of it, right? It's about understanding. For me, especially, I'm somebody who really likes control. I like to control what's going on. I like to be the one making the decisions about things. And I think that you can create a vision, and you can create goals, and you can create a path, and that only exists so much. You also must have that path within the context of just reality. I don't think any of us that were interested in screenwriting in 2019 assumed that the world would radically change and then change our industry, with it. And the pandemic has really altered Hollywood, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what are the short-term changes and what are the long-term changes there. And I think part of that is just an adjustment to change. And there's an acceptance, I think, of reality and an acceptance of change. And I think that's part of why you need to live in that present moment too, is that if you're only living for the thing that you're trying to build in the future, that thing may not come. And if you're putting all of your bets on this one thing, then if it doesn't happen, you're totally and completely crushed. And I'm not saying that to say don't dream big or don't have visions. Absolutely have clear vision, as clear of a vision as you can. But you have to understand that the world is a constantly changing place, and that if you are waiting, it just may not come. The things that you're waiting on may not be there for you in the long term. And you want to make sure that now your life is how you want it to be, that you're experiencing things now. You are making an impact in the way that you want to now. You are actually not delaying every single element of gratification. There is absolute truth to delayed gratification, and at the same time, to achieve that delayed gratification also requires a certain element of falling in love with the process of doing that thing now, so that you can then get the long-term gratification. And really, in that sense, I think that's the best way to live, because you can enjoy what you're doing now and then be gratified as well later, and kind of get both, right? And you can have an enjoyable present and get more that you want in the future. And that sounds, kind of that I'm going to tell you guys to take a meditation class or whatever, which is not what I'm doing necessarily. But the point is that just that concept in writing carries over into the rest of your life. And if you want to practice that, right? If you want to practice releasing the stress and anxiety of the future and focusing on what needs to be done now, writing a script is a great way to practice, because writing a script is going to allow you to practice focusing on the page in front of you and writing that page and then writing the next one. And having an outline is great for that too, because rather than having to always worry about what's going on and keep everything in your head, you can just reference your outline and say, okay, this is the next scene, I'll write that scene. Then this is the next one, then I'll write that one. And then suddenly you realize you have 100 pages down and you have an actual screenplay. So I hope that's helpful to you. And I think it's a really valuable thing. I think it's something I've really been thinking about a lot this year. I think this even falls back into The Way of the Superior Man and some of the things that I was talking about with that book. So this is just something that's been on my mind pretty consistently. And I think it's something that is one of my main struggles. My main stress comes from thinking forward always and not allowing myself to just sort of be here. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And I'll see you guys next week.